So let's start the conversation by talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The president has been signing executive orders left and right. One of them has been to dismantle DEI in government. Um, Both he and his administration see diversity, equity, and inclusion as something that is prejudice, and specifically prejudice towards white people. And there's also been directly and indirectly accusations that DEI is to blame for some of the wildfires in California and the management of that crisis to the a couple of weeks ago the crash of an airliner with a military helicopter. So let's talk about DEI. We've had this conversation many times, but let's start with you.
Yeah, I just think that he doesn't believe in it, right? I don't believe in it. I don't believe in social engineering. I think it is prejudice and it is discriminatory towards certain people. If it's white people, then it's white people. I believe in meritocracy. As we all know, I'm a coach, and I could never, implement DEI in coaching, right? We need the best players, period. I don't go out recruiting looking for, anything other than talented player, individual personality. Um, that's really what I feel. You imagine the NFL and NBA if they did DEI, what would it lead to? I do believe that, did Trump really believe, or does he know something that we don't? That there were certain standards that were lowered in the FAA and the traffic controllers and the management of handling those wildfires in California. Um, I don't know all the information, but standards have been lowered. One of my former assistant coaches was a New York City fireman for 15 years, and he told me that they were lowering the standards, test scores. They were changing the tests just so they can help have people from different backgrounds to become firemen. So that's what I do know, and that's what I believe. I just believe that you got to the best person should get the job, and it's based on your experience, based on what you've accomplished, or the dues that you've paid. That's what I believe in.
Well, look, I think if if standards are being lowered in order to accommodate other candidates, yeah, I think that's wrong. I also do believe in meritocracy, but I don't think it's one or the other. I think there could be meritocracy and absolutely uh, be diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in fact, there have been many studies that show that a diverse workforce is actually good for business to have people from different backgrounds and come together, and innovation lives in that space. Now, look, I think one of the biggest problems that have been made with DEI, and I've certainly experienced it, is that it's been oversimplified to mean only the optics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I mean by that is it's just about the optics of race, perceived gender, ethnicity, and other, and not enough about the things that we don't readily see, like education, where you grew up in what part of the country, your interests, and I would even think also political leanings, whether it's liberal or conservative. Now that's a whole other issue. DEI has been weaponized politically. But, and we've had this conversation off camera, right? If I talk to you about diversity by itself, I think we have more in agreement than we have disagreement. And the same thing with equity and inclusion. And I tell you, like I use you as an example, you absolutely, and I believe this, you're recruiting the best, but you're also recruiting from the United States and outside the United States, because I believe that you also value diversity in the sense that players from not just the United States, but because of resources that you have available to you, the best players elsewhere, and bringing those players together from different backgrounds is actually a good thing, and I think makes you competitive. Would you agree to that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think one of the things that I go out when I go out recruiting, obviously looking for best. Like our team is one of the most diverse teams in our department, and my coaching staff, the most diverse coaching staff in the department. We have Ecuadorian, Portuguese, Italian, Filipino, Dominican, Peruvian. But that just worked out that way, and I didn't go out and select them for what their ethnicity is, and so one of the things in recruiting, one of the main reasons I go overseas is just that the talent pool here in the United States is not it's not strong enough. So, and there's 210 teams in Division One men's soccer, and there's only so many handful of very, very good players. So you have to complement that with going overseas and looking for that kind of talent, just like all European clubs do, South American clubs do, where they all have foreign players in their squad. Um, so, it's not that I don't want diversity per se in my on my team or my staff, but I let it happens that way, right? Because talent rises to the top, and then the eyes that see the talent recruit it, right? So I think is Trump anti DEI? I suppose he is, but his cabinet is all mostly women, and and it's a pretty diverse group. Cash Patel just got sworn in today, and he's Indian American.
Second topic that I want to talk about, which is USAID, which is more about the economy, right? Where is the United States spending its money outside of the country in assisting other countries, cut waste, save money? Absolutely, right? When you look at some of those things on that list, they're shocking. But there's also a lot of good that USAID does. You want to look at what's working, what's not working, but you can't from one day to another shut down these agencies that, yes, there are issues, but there's a lot of good that they're doing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think Trump does that. That's kind of the art of the deal, where he comes out a little bombastically and says we're going to shut it down, and then he ends up not shutting it down, but he ends up cleaning it up. And I definitely think the USAID USAID needs to be cut down. At least 80%. Do I think there's some great programs that cannot be thrown out? Absolutely, right? I think we all agree with that. But what to me what's shocking is that all these departments, all these agencies are just full of fluff and waste, and people, we have one of the biggest middle classes in the world, and these are hardworking people paying taxes on everything: property tax, sales tax, income tax, you name it, right? Taxes on gas, taxes on the roads, tolls, and it's just it's frustrating for people to see that all those, and we're not talking about millions, right? We're talking about billions of dollars.
You mentioned the art of the deal. We all know, right? He has a business background. That's what's made him the billionaire that he is. And I think that government needs some of that type of approach. Um, but it also, he needs to have sense and sensibility in that all these changes that he's enacting are affecting real people. I remember having worked at NBC Universal when I was a news director at Telemundo, and I was laid off. And I had to, before I was laid off, lay off people. These were decisions made by C-suite um, uh, decision makers with some big titles, with golden parachutes, and we live in a global society. So some of the initiatives that USAID provides around healthcare, especially, is also protecting us, right? We need to invest in helping our neighbors across the planet because in helping them, we're helping ourselves. Your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have no qualms with helping other people, right, outside of the United States. But when you're 36 million billion trillion dollars in debt, you know, healthcare costs are through the roof. Uh, you know, you know, the cost of living has gone up tremendously. You know, all these trade deals and these tariffs that he's trying to do, I think is going to end up helping us, right? Because the trade deficit we have with Mexico, with Canada, with China, with Europe, it's in the trillions, and he needs to. We need to correct that, right? I think, you know, it's like anything, right? You got to take care of your home. You can't go out and start helping homeless people if your house is in disarray, right? You don't have food in your own house. How could you go out and help other people if you can't help out your own family? So I think that's his approach, right? Help, you know, fix our problems first, and then we can go out and we can, you know, do what we've always done, right? You know, go out and help in countries that need, you know, they need, you know, food, water, whatever. I think we've shown that we've done that, but now we're in a hole, right? We're deep in a hole, and I think we need to correct and look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, let's fix us first. And
We need to help take care of us as much as we need to take care of our neighbors as well. Now, speaking of our neighbors, and I know this is a topic you wanted to talk about, and it's the war in Ukraine. This week, President Trump again made headlines for things that he says on social media, and he attacked the Ukrainian President Zelensky, calling him a dictator. A lot of that born out of frustration. Also, more news coming out of that part of the world in regard to Zelensky not necessarily buying into some of the Trump administration suggestions to end the war with Russia, but also Trump's positioning in criticizing Zelensky as a, you know, quote unquote dictator when he's very chummy with President Putin, who by all means has certainly been in power for a very long time under very questionable situations, especially during elections. What are your thoughts about the Trump administration's handling of that conflict?
listen, I think he comes from a place of, you know, a humane, you know, a humane perspective. He says he doesn't want people to die anymore, right? Ukraine has, you know, pretty much, you know, killed all their young men in a whole generation, right? So I think he wants to end the war, right? And I think, you know, he has to play his cards correctly with Putin, right? Because we're both, you know, nuclear powers. But in terms of Zelensky, I agree. I never liked him. I think he's a dictator. I think the fact that he ended you know, they were supposed to have elections a year ago, and he shut them down, saying that we can't have elections because of a war. So he's an unelected president right now.
And I'm not saying not to be critical, but I think this is the president of the United States. What he says, whether it's in a press conference or social media, matters. Zelensky is not a dictator.
You know, he probably shouldn't have said that. I take it as, again, when he says things like that, or he says he's going to do something, he goes to the far end, right, to the extreme, and then he pulls it back slowly as he gets what he wants, right? I think listen, I think Donald Trump is like an alpha male, and he comes into the room, and he stands tall, he looks tough, and that's part of what he is, right? And that's how you have to be when you deal with these world leaders, you know, whether it's Putin or Macron or Trudeau. I just think, or the president of China, that these guys, you know, that they're tough. They're tough to deal with, and if you show sign of weakness in any which way, they're going to take advantage of that, and they've done that in the past. And I just think that's his approach. And yeah, some people aren't going to like it, right? And there's been times that I have not liked it, but you know, at the end, you know, the things that he gets done are where I believe is needed for this country.
Yeah, well, alpha male, I would say he's a bully, and I think it's easy to take that stance when you're the most powerful country in the world. but I hear what you're coming from. Last thing I wanted to talk about, which again is about what President Trump is sharing on social media. Earlier, he shared this on X and Truth Social, and he said, "He who saves his country does not violate any law," which was drawn from a quote from Napoleon Bonaparte. But let's talk about that, right? He who saves his country does not violate any law, which is about the conversation about is if the president does something, should he or she be treated the same as you or me? Do you think the president is above the law, even as he put it or quoted when he's doing good or from his perspective, doing good?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, or point you're making. Um, Listen, I think Trump is, again. Does he have some bully qualities? I don't know. I think that's just tough business, right? And I think he's probably a believer that he'd rather be feared than loved, and I think that's all his bravado comes from, right? Do I think he's perfect? Absolutely not. Do I think that quote is borderline? Not probably responsible, right? Um, yeah, I think it is, right? But we always knew that about him.
Part of Trump's background is also in media. He understands media and he understands how to manipulate media. And as you said, sometimes he puts something out there just to see what happens, right? To test the waters about um, the public's response to these little suggestions that he's making. So he absolutely does a very good job of manipulating media, especially legacy media. I mean, I, I've worked at MSNBC. We would produce actual segments, hour segments, day-long coverage just around what he posted on Twitter, which is now called X. I have no problem with President Trump 200 or 2,000 executive orders, right? As long as he is drawing from what is available to him legally and as president, right? The executive branch, go for it. Other presidents have used executive orders, right? Not as many as he has enacted in how he's using it, but others have. And in situations like we saw with USAID, um, the courts come in, right? The judicial branch, and they pump the brakes on a particular executive order, and that needs to play out. I think our founding fathers were very smart in having three different branches so that no one branch had more power than the other. So yeah, look, if he's following what is available to him, however unpopular to some of his critics, as long as he's he's above board, and then the process in the case of USAID plays out, I'm all for that. I do think that um, whatever the outcome is, needs to be respected on both sides. If at the end of the day, the if it goes up the ladder in the judicial system and it's favorable to him, however much I am critical of that decision, I'm going to respect the decisions of the court. But if it goes the other way, I do hope that he and his administration and his followers say, you know what? He went through the system and he lost, and not continue to put seeds of doubt and say, well, this was rigged or that is rigged. And it's like, no, no, no. So when you win, right? When the in this case, when the courts favor you, it was it wasn't rigged. Nothing, it was done correctly, right? Including winning the election. But when it doesn't go your way, well, it's rigged. I mean, it can't be that way. It isn't that way. Accept it when you win and accept it when you fall short, and then find another way to get it done. Your final thoughts.
I agree 100% with what you just said. You lose, right? You got to accept losing. That's part of the learning process in life.